All right. Hi, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started for today. We'll hop right into the webinar in a moment here, but just before we get started, we'll start just with some brief introductions. So I'm Kaylee Hansen with SVA Consulting, and joining me today is Julia as well as Austin. So if it's your first time here, welcome. If you're coming back to join us in these webinar series, welcome back. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. As we go through today's webinar, we'll have an agenda, we'll be presenting, but please feel free to drop any questions within the chat, and we'll be monitoring those as we go throughout, and then we'll also have a designated Q&A session at the end as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So today's webinar topic is a little bit more technical than some of the ones we've done in the past, and we'll really be focusing on what we've referred to as some of the core no-code features within Acumatica. So how we can start to customize and personalize Acumatica further to meet the needs of your guys' specific requirements that might not just come out of the box with Acumatica as we start to configure it. And again, focusing on how normal users within the system can start to manage these things without the need for a very technical resource or a development resource as well. So we'll go ahead and dive right in, where we'll start within the agenda. We'll just go through a bit of the core components that we'll be focusing on today, and we'll just start to define those. So probably terms that you guys have heard before, whether that be working in Acumatica, past webinars as well. But we'll just start to define what some of those core kind of no code or low code customization areas within the system are. And then we'll go through some use cases of when would we start to use those compared to the other features of Acumatica, some use cases around that as well. And then we'll get into the live demo, essentially showing you use cases and real life examples of how we can use all of those. And then we'll wrap up with the Q&A and the next steps as well. All right, so just getting into some of the definitions here, the first thing we'll start to talk through is the concept of attributes. So this is probably an area that a lot of you guys are using today, and if you're not, we'll start to leverage further. But essentially, they're configurable, reusable fields that can start to extend the Acumatica records, such as customers, vendors, transactions, all of those types of things, with additional information. So on the example on the right here, maybe you have your vendors, all of those core information lives on that vendor record, but we want to start to do things like score our vendors. So we'll have vendor scores, vendor tiers, whatever the case may be, to start to define that a little bit further. And then all of our attributes that we add can be used and added in for things like data entry and reporting as well. So we'll see that come into play today. But think of attributes as essentially additional fields that are more informational fields that we can add that might not exist out of the box to make it more specific to you. And then we can use those for reporting as well. The next one we'll see is generic inquiries. So you've probably heard us use this term a lot. It's probably something that you're seeing every single day if you're logging into Acumatica. But essentially what the generic inquiry is essentially that list view of data. So it looks a little bit like Excel. You can filter on all of those columns, those types of things. And really the generic inquiries obviously serve as ad hoc reporting views. So I can start to drill down further into my invoices, for example, my vendor bills and payments. All of those types of things is going to be kind of the generic inquiry. And then they also serve as a basis for things like creating pivot table views or creating side panels or dashboards as well. So again, we'll see how we can start to configure those further from what exists out of the box in Acumatica today. And then how once we configure that further, those can be used as a basis for things like those dashboards and side panels. So here's kind of one of those examples here is just anywhere you have kind of that list view of data with the rows and the columns, that's going to be your generic inquiry that we'll dive deeper into as well. Next is going to be the pivot table. So like Ed mentioned, it's using data from within that generic inquiry to start. And then you can start to make, more of a summary type of view of data with grouping, aggregating, all of those types of things, similar to what you would do in Excel, but you can do that directly within Acumatica, again, using that generic inquiry as the basis there. Side panels, we'll take a look at that, but essentially the purpose that they'll serve in Acumatica is displaying additional information for you within the same view without having to, drill down or go into different screens within Acumatica. So one example for that could be, if I'm looking at my customer inquiry, maybe I want a side panel view into the customer details so that I don't have to drill down into, that blue hyperlink to see that. But as I toggle on that left-hand side, we'll see that side panel update as well. Or, as I'm on my customer inquiry, I want to see customer statements right away. Again, I can just toggle through that list view without having to drill down and find all of those customer statements. So again, we'll see some of those out of the box side panels today, and then how we could add those within different inquiry views as well. And then lastly, probably a lot of people's favorites and something that they're used to working through a lot is going to be your dashboard. So you guys are familiar with dashboards, but those can be role-based views. It's essentially, as we're logging into the system, what are some of those key metrics, key charts, and reports that we want to see kind of within that single type of view, based on what's important to me as a user. So we'll take a look at some of those dashboards again out of the box, and then how to modify those and customize them further directly within the UI to add things like additional widgets that aren't on there today, or creating dashboards from scratch. And here's just a standard controller dashboard. So you'll see kind of what's there today in terms of some of those different metrics and KPIs, different types of charts as well. And then we'll see how we can start to add additional views into that. All right, so breaking down a little bit further, when would we start to use what? We talked about this as well a little bit already, but we'll dive a little bit deeper into, some of the use cases behind it. So those attributes or those user-defined fields, we'll talk through essentially the differences there, but attributes are essentially used as the basis for those user-defined fields. And we can start to use those to capture, business-specific information. So, hey, Acumatica works great for us, but we're in a very specific industry and we need additional fields that don't exist out of the box today, perhaps because they're irrelevant to other types of users or different types of companies within Acumatica. So we can add that to make it more business-specific information in terms of our data. We can use that to improve our reporting and filtering, what's important to us. And then it can also adapt as the business needs evolve. So, hey, fields we were tracking before, maybe we don't always want those moving forward, but we want to add new ones because now, we have a different line of business or different components that we're tracking revenue against, for example. So those are very easy to kind of add within the system as well. So one kind of example we have here is if we add, a retail channel field on the customers, maybe we want to see channel by, Amazon, Shopify, or wholesale. Maybe those aren't necessarily different order types in Acumatica, but on the customer level, we just want to track, are those customers, particularly working through Amazon, through Shopify, or through a different type of revenue stream there. Or things like, hey, we're tracking warranties and we want to make sure we're tracking expiration dates against those. And then maybe we want business automation to say, hey, anytime the expiration date is approaching, let's send an automated email out to, our vendors, for example, or our customers, or internally as well. So just a couple examples. And then again, you'll see some of those today as we dive into Acumatica. Generic inquiries, again, we started to show this or dive deeper into that, but really, how can we do more ad hoc reporting? How can we work primarily within Acumatica and not need to export data to Excel all the time in order to get what we need? That's essentially where we're serving the purpose for the GIs, as well as driving things like the business events, the dashboards, different integrations as well, or OData feeds to things like, Power BI or other external platforms as well. And then here we could see, maybe I have a full sales order inquiry on a distribution type of flow, but I want to see, what orders are scheduled to ship in the next 5 days. Perhaps that also have inventory shortages. So how can we get very detailed in terms of using some of those GIs and then tweaking them and defining them further? Pivot tables, again, pretty self-explanatory, but hey, not all of these fields and data or information is super important to me, or I can't exactly tell what I'm looking at when I just see a generic inquiry view. But how can we see, things like sales by product category, sales by region, or sales by month, to start to summarize that data at a higher level as opposed to kind of all of that detailed transaction. Side panels, again, we saw a couple examples of that, but essentially reducing clicks as we're going through and seeing their data. not having to go to multiple different screens to see it as well. And then how can we see, things like supporting information or additional contacts that might feed, what we're seeing on a generic inquiry view as well. So, as we're looking at a sales order, for example, can we view things like the customer record, the AR balance against that customer record, any open shipments against that sales order or invoices or activities as well. So we'll see, again, examples of this. And then lastly, our dashboards. So again, pretty self-explanatory, but as a sales manager, for example, I really want to see things like how many open opportunities do we have right now? How many bookings have we had this month, and how does that compare to last month? Who are our top customers that we should focus on? How are our sales doing across salespeople, across territories, all of those types of things that really can help you guys in terms of the decision making within the organization, based on the data that you have in front of you. So just a high level overview, just to orient us around what we'll start to see. With that, we'll get into Acumatica and we'll see all of this in action in terms of how users can start to essentially work through and customize these areas, again, directly through the UI. Before I pivot into Acumatica, one kind of note that I will make is a lot of the functions that Julie and I will be doing today are sometimes referred to as kind of like a super user type of role in Acumatica. So if you're following along and you're looking at, your Acumatica instance, for an example, and if you're not seeing the ability to add things like attributes or edit generic inquiries or edit dashboards, likely it has to do with user security. So definitely reach out. We can help you guys with that. But one thing I will preface as well is probably not everyone in your organization will or should have access to these areas. Essentially, what we're customizing today is going to be across the board. So we just want to be careful in terms of who internally within your organization should have access to these tools kind of for the group. So just a couple of things before we dive right in. All right, so I'll go ahead and I'll pivot into Acumatica, and we'll kind of work through the different components as we saw them defined within the previous slides as well. So what I'll start with is how we can start to add attributes or user-defined fields within Acumatica. This might be a little bit of a repeat for those of you who work in this area more often, but I'll also show how within the modern UI we can start to add those to those entry screens as well pretty easily. So I'll start by going into my attributes component. And here I can see if I just click this icon, any of the attributes that I've ever added within Acumatica. So again, these could be pulled into things like, vendor classes, for example. For this type of vendor class, I want to track these certain attributes or fields, or for this customer or item class, I want to track those fields. So it can be added to things like item classes, customer classes, all of those kind of master data records. And then I might add additional ones, as in this example, user-defined fields that I want to pull into, specific views and entry screens and then report off of it as well. So for my example, what I'm going to do is I'll just pop into my AP bills section to start. So if I just drill down into one of these AP bills that I have created already, here's kind of all the information that I'm tracking currently in Acumatica. A lot of this is out of the box. But maybe, on an AP bill, for example, as I'm entering in that information, maybe we want to have some sort of payment priority associated with that. So that could mean, hey, obviously we're looking at paying all these vendors, but as we start to prioritize those, how should we prioritize those, on an AP bill by AP bill basis, so that then as we're going out to pay, we can start to prioritize the bills with essentially higher priority. Could have a bunch of different examples in terms of what else you want to add here. But that's kind of the one that we'll be working off of for this example. All right, so I'll go ahead and I'll add this as an attribute, and then we'll talk through some of the components here as well. I'll just call this priority and name it payment priority. And then a couple of things here. Attributes can come I'll call it in different shapes and sizes. So you can have things like text fields where that's just going to be a free text field where users can enter that in. So maybe it's a description that we want displayed as an attribute, and then maybe we want that, pulled into something like a report view, for example, or an invoice I could send out to a customer, whatever the case may be. Those can be set up as text fields. They can be set up as number fields. So as we set them up as numbers, Acumatica is going to validate, hey, we're not putting things like letters in that. It's just a true number that we're adding here. It can be a combo. So that's what I'll do, essentially a list that people can select from, or a multi-select combo. So same thing, you can define that list, but allow multiple different selections from that as opposed to just one or the other. This could be something like a checkbox. So, hey, do we have vendor certifications for this vendor, for example? Maybe we just want a checkbox there indicating yes or no. A date or a time. So think things like, hey, we want to add an expiration date field. We could go ahead and add that as a date time attribute. And then a selector is a little bit more advanced as well, in that if there's related data that you want to pull in and track against a record in Acumatica, this would allow you to set that up as a selector. So for example, if I wanted to have a selector for something like an employee or an owner, for example, that can point to any other field or table within Acumatica, and we could select, something that exists there onto another record in Acumatica as well. So different types of attributes there. What I'll start with is just going to be a combo. So it's going to be a relatively straightforward example. I'll give it a value, and then each of those can have a description as well. That's essentially what that end user is going to see as they start to select these types of components. And we'll keep it relatively straightforward. In my priorities, we'll just do low, medium, and high. So anything with more of the high priority, obviously that would indicate to those that are paying out of the system, hey, let's pay these AP bills first, even though, maybe the date's the same on them. All right, and then I'll give it a sort order if I want to. And again, that's just going to be the order that this will display for the user. And so now I have my attribute created. And once it's created in Acumatica, now I can go ahead and I can add it to things like master data classes, or I can add it to different fields within my user-defined fields component. All right, so I'll go there next. Since I want to add this to my bills and adjustments screen, what I'll do is I'm just going to drill down into one of them. I could create a new one, but essentially I want this entry screen popped up because this is where I'm going to add this in. So once it's added, I'm going to go through this little settings icon. And once we do, we'll see this area here for manage user-defined fields. Again, if you don't have access to this area, it's likely a security issue. So your user would just need to have access to this in order to go ahead and create these user-defined fields. So I'll go ahead and click manage. And now that I have, you'll see if I had previous attributes added as those user-defined fields for this particular screen, those would show up here. You'll see I don't have any yet, but I'm going to go ahead and add it based off of that attribute that I just created. So I'm going to search for my attribute. I named it priority, if I can spell that right. Payment priority, and I'll go ahead and click OK. So now it becomes a user-defined field that now I'm able to add to both my bills and adjustments inquiry as well as my entry screen. If there's other ones, obviously I can just go ahead and add multiple. You can add essentially as many user-defined fields as you'd like here as well. I'm just going to add that one for now. We'll exit out of that editor, and that's now going to bring us back into my bills and adjustments entry screen. All right, so now this is where if you're used to adding the user-defined fields, it might be a little bit different now in the modern UI to make it a little bit more easy to essentially add this where you'd like within the entry screen. So now that that's added, I'm going to go ahead and open up what's called this UI configuration tool. This is a newer tool within the modern UI that allows you to personalize these types of views a lot more. And so now you'll see once I'm in the UI configuration, I have little settings icons and essentially all of these different components. So whether it's, hey, I want to add areas to my payment info or my receipt info or any of those types of components, or at the header level, I can go ahead and add that in as well. So in my case, maybe I want to add it over into this box. So what I can do is I can just click this little gear icon. And now what it's showing me is all of the fields that I have access to just kind of out of the box within this type of view. You'll see some of them aren't visible. I've hid those perhaps. Before I go in and dive into adding my user-defined field, just a couple of notes here. You'll see a lot more what I'll call available elements that are just out of the box fields essentially related to this build that I could add as well. So this is also an area where within the modern UI, we can add a lot more. So if I wanted to add, things like document level due dates at the top of this header, I could add that. If I wanted to add, things like retainage amounts, perhaps on the totals component, I could go ahead and add those. So we're automatically going to have access to essentially all of the fields within Acumatica that we can add within this AP bill that are related. And I could go ahead and just move those kind of on and off. In my example, I added something that wasn't a field in Acumatica already. So I added that as that user-defined field. So it's going to show up at the top here as that user-defined field. If I had multiple, we'd have that kind of full drop-down of all user-defined fields that I created. But now I'll go ahead, I'll just toggle it over here. If I wanted to move it around, I could as well. And then I'll go ahead and click apply. And now we see that payment priority is here as well. I'll move that a little bit further. We'll actually add it to the bottom, but very easy to kind of drag and drop and add these different fields to any of these components with this little gear icon as well. I'll go ahead and apply it, and now it's going to essentially override what I had previously. It's going to pull that forward, and now this is a field that is essentially selectable on an AP bill basis. So for example, for American Glass and Door, maybe this is a lower priority to pay. Let's prioritize some of the other AP bills that I have first. So that's essentially a background on adding attributes, and then in this case, adding those through that UI configuration to an entry screen in Acumatica. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot a little bit. We're going to focus a lot on the generic inquiries. So I'm going to go ahead and add what I just added to my generic inquiry. If I go back into my bills and adjustments, even though I added that user-defined field, we'll see it's not essentially available for me to add on this GI quite yet. So it's not in these essentially available fields to add. So now I can't yet filter on, hey, we just want to see any AP bills that are in a low priority or a high priority. So now we'll pop into kind of the next component, which is my generic inquiry building tool. So on any generic inquiry in Acumatica, similar to kind of that settings icon on the entry screen, now we can go ahead and edit these types of inquiry views. So we'll focus in the realm of the bills and adjustments, but very well this could be, hey, I want additional field on my sales order inquiry. Again, you'll have that option on all of these essentially list view of data fields. All right, so I'll go into my payables and we'll start to edit this generic inquiry. We'll see this for a couple of different use cases here, but once I pop into here, this is kind of behind the scenes of what's building that inquiry view for me. So just a couple of components here. We'll see things like, in this case, I have different tables or data sources that it's pulling from. So things like my AP invoice, my vendor, all of those types of things. And then we'll also have relations between those tables as well. So Julia is going to show a little bit more of an advanced example of if we need to add additional tables and relate those, how we could start to do those as well. I will preface that's one area where we might want a team member who has, some SQL join experience in that. But Acumatica does have settings that essentially make that a little bit easier of a process as well. So we'll see that in a bit. And then really this results grid tab is essentially all of the results that exist on that inquiry view that then users can go ahead and select and filter by as well. You'll see what I have today, what's visible versus what's not visible. And then I can go ahead and add additional fields. So this could be, any field that exists in these table views in Acumatica. But here I can see, okay, since I added that to the AP bills table essentially as a field, it's showing up now as this attribute for priority. and I could go ahead and add this in. I'm going to default it to be visible, and so users can start to see that. And so now this is going to be added to my GI. I'll save this, and if I go ahead and view this inquiry, now this is a column that's been added at the top here. So now I can see, okay, here's payment priority. And now if I want to clear this filter, for example, and filter just by, low payment priority, I only have that one right now since we just added it. But now that becomes a field again that I can add onto my GI and filter and report on further as well. All right, I'm going to hand it over now to Julia. She's going to stay within that GI Builder tool, and she's going to show us how we can add a couple more advanced components, such as, hey, we want to add things like a calculation field now, as well as we want to add a field that maybe isn't available to us to select from within that results grid, just out of the box. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaylee. Okay, let me share my screen here. All right. I'm in the same instance as Kaylee, and as she already mentioned, we're gonna stay in the realm of accounts payables here. So another powerful feature of the generic inquiry is that you can add calculated fields. So instead of exporting the data to Excel and doing calculations there, manipulating the values, you can perform these directly in Acumatica. In this example, I'm going to show you how you can display vendor balances in a way that might be easier to view and understand. So in this case, adjustments and prepayments will be shown as a reduction. So instead of showing them as a positive value, as it is now, we can display them as negative amounts. Okay, for that, we're gonna go back into our edit generic inquiry. And we're gonna go into our result grid. And now I'm gonna add a field, and I could call it balance due. And then here is where I'm gonna add my calculation. So I'm gonna open this field, and I'm gonna copy my calculation here so you guys don't have to watch me type this out. So this calculation is an if statement. So as you can see, it's going to check if the document is either an adjustment, and if it is, then it will multiply it by -1. Or if it is a prepayment, it will do the same. I can also go ahead now and validate my formula here. That looks good. Then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. For the schema, I'm gonna add AP invoice. Okay, awesome. And another thing before I'm showing you how this will look like, what we can add here is for the total aggregation function, we could add a sum. This will tell Acumatica to automatically calculate the balance due values and display the overall amount at the bottom of the generic inquiry. And then once we filter by vendor or other criteria, that amount will automatically adjust. So I'm gonna go ahead and select sum here. Awesome. Gonna go ahead and save. Now we can view that inquiry. And now at the end, it will show me the total balance. And as you can see here, for example, we'll just show this debit adjustment from Mid-City is now displayed as a negative value instead of a positive value. And down here, you can see the sum of all balance dues. And when I go ahead and filter and say, I just want to see my Mid-City invoices, I could do that. So now, as you can see, the amount changed, and it will show me that. All right, this is just a little bit about the calculations. What we can do now before we go into the advanced setting, how to add fields that aren't available for us now. I'm quickly going to show you guys how you could start adding pivot tables and with the information that you have in this generic inquiry already. So I click here on this little table icon, I can create a new one. Right now, I could call it, for example, in this case, we could do one spent by vendor to just have an easier view of larger amounts and transactions still within Acumatica, not having to export to Excel in this case. If I have the right access requirements, I could also share it or set it as a default. For now, I'm just going to keep it for myself. And then here in the modern UI, I can just drag and drop the values I want to look at into my screen. So for the values, I'm going to select the amount. For my rows, I'll do vendors for now, right here. And then my column is going to be the dates. And before I add this, what I can do here now, I can get really granular. Do I want to see it by year, half years, quarters, month, weeks, days, hours, etc. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and show it by years. And once I close it will display that pivot table. And same as in the generic inquiry, here I could go ahead and filter by years or by vendors. And as you can already guess, all these blue hyperlinks are drillable. So I wanted to see what that number is made of, what kind of invoices. I could go ahead and drill down here and do some more overviewing of these invoices. And then I can go back here to my pivot table. I could either adjust the pivot table and, for example, now adjust it to monthly spend, or I could just create a new pivot table here and create one for monthly spend and yearly spend and toggle in between them. All right. Next, we're gonna go into the adding related tables to a generic inquiry. So I will go ahead and go into another screen in my checks and payments. So here, a practical example how generic inquiries can be extended to support business automations. And in this scenario, the goal would be to automate the sending a payment notification email to vendors whenever a payment has been processed. So in this checks and payments inquiry, they already contain all the payment information we need, but it doesn't contain the vendor remit to contact name or the email address that would be needed to perform that automation. Therefore, this data, the contact information, is living in a different data source, which we first need to add to that generic inquiry. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this generic inquiry right here. And I'm going to add a related table now. Awesome. I will re-add this contact table to be able to display that contact information. So now I selected it, as you can see, parent table stays then AP payment, and now the child table is my AP contact. So I'm adding this and closing this out. Once I do this, Acumatica automatically pulls in the table relation. Here's Kaylee already prefaced. If you have a lot of experience with joint tables, you can add them and adjust them here. For example, if I wanted to, instead of having an inner joint, I could say it should be a left joint. If that looks good, then I can go back into the result grid, and now I will have the ability to add these context fields, which I wouldn't have been able to if I didn't add that new data source. So I'm gonna go ahead, and now instead of AP payment, I'm gonna add the AP contact. And then here, I'm gonna add that email address. And then I'm gonna add another field and add the name of my vendor. It's here, full name. I could call it just something like that, and then go ahead and save it. And once I do that, I will be able to view the email address and the name on my checks and balances right here. And the email address. And again, I could toggle this, but this basically would be the preface to be able to do that automation and be able to set up, for example, an email template to every time I'm releasing these payments to send out that automated notification to these vendors that a payment has been processed on my side. All right.
We do have a
I'm
couple
gonna,
of questions that came in while you're
mhm.
presenting there, Julia. So my hope is that that either you or Kaylee can speak to these. The first question that came in from an attendee is, does Acumatica automatically save the pivots that have been created? Or if not, what would that process look like?
Yeah, yep, I can speak to that one.
Mhm.
So it will go ahead and save those. If you go ahead, build it, essentially press OK, and it shows you that view, it's going to save those. So if Julia goes back into her bills and adjustments screen, for example, here's where if she toggles, you'll see that spend by vendor has automatically saved for her. So it will save. And then similar to like filtering within a generic inquiry, if you wanted to share that with others or make it the default, you would just need permissions to do so, but that is available as well. So short answer, yes, it will save it as long as you build it. And then from there, you would have the ability to come back to it and then share it if you had permissions to do so.
Awesome. And then the other question that came in is what was shown here, both by you, Kaylee, as well as you, Julia. Is this limited to 26R1, or would this be available, for example, in 25R2, for instance?
Yeah, yep. So in terms of adding attributes and user-defined fields, editing those generic inquiries, as well as adding things like the calculation fields and the pivot tables, all of that is available prior to 26R1. Some of those features just make it a little bit easier and user-friendly, I'll say, within 26R1 specifically. So the pivot tables, that's one. Let me preface a little bit, not 26R1, but rather the modern UI. So once you're in the modern UI, the pivot table view that Julia showed, the drag and drop, that's a lot easier probably than kind of the old UI pivot table, as well as I added those user-defined fields, being able to easily add those into any of the entry screen areas through that UI configuration. Those were available before, but the modern UI just makes it a little bit easier for you.
And to further elaborate on what Kaylee just mentioned, the modern UI is available beginning in 25R2 and future versions after that. So that would be inclusive of obviously 26R1 and future versions also.
Yeah, perfect. All right. It looks like some of what Juliet showed is maybe of interest to some of the people in the chat. So we can definitely follow up in terms of how we could walk through adding that type of example given what version of Acumatica you're on as well. Awesome. Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and I'll show examples here to wrap it up of adding side panel views as well as dashboard views. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I'm still on my AP bill inquiry. I'll first start by adding a side panel. So you're starting to see a common theme but where we're essentially living within Acumatica to make a lot of these changes. This is that same generic inquiry. I'll call it kind of behind the scenes as we saw earlier. We played around a lot with the results grid. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a side panel. So this navigation tab will essentially be the tab that we'll leverage to add side panel views within Acumatica. So what I'll do here is in this example, if I just go back for a minute here and view this inquiry to just kind of remind us what it looked like previously, we have this full inquiry view. And then anywhere you see those kind of lit up side icons, those are going to be your side panels. So you can see I already have two that are created in my environment, one for vendor details. So as I'm essentially toggling on the left-hand side, it's going to go ahead and show me all of the vendor details related to that AP bill on this side panel view. Same thing goes for things like my AP bill details. So I already had that as a side panel view in my instance. So now instead of having to drill down into all of these, I'm just seeing all of those details related to those bills on the right-hand side update as well. So now in this example, I might want to have, additional information related to that vendor in this side panel view. So maybe I want to add things like a report of all of my open AP documents by vendor, for example. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in my inquiry tool, and I'll add that as a side panel. So now you'll see here I have a series of different links that I can essentially create within my side panel view. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add this AP documents by vendor. This is going to be essentially the report that I'm going to pull open to add into my side panel view. And then as I added that, I'm going to select essentially the window mode is going to be a side panel view. And then I can say, okay, what do I want to pull in so that as I'm toggling between, that left-hand side, what is it that we're matching to see essentially that report on the right-hand side. And so I'll go ahead and I'll match this to pull based off of the vendor ID. So we'll pull in my vendor account ID. Here we go. If I want to, I can customize a bit of the different types of icons as well. So this might just be, account balance, for example. I'll use this icon or details, whatever we want there. And then if I want a custom title other than, the title related to that screen that I'm pulling in, I could go ahead and modify that as well. So what I'll do here, I'll go ahead and save this. And once I do, I've added in that side panel view, we'll view that inquiry again. And now we have a new icon at the right side. So what it's going to show is based off of the vendor that I have on this bill, it's going to show me, in this case, my AP documents by vendor report. So I can see I have quite a few different AP bills open for American Door and Glass, perhaps for Mid-City utilities as well. But now as I toggle between those, I have this as that side panel view. I can make it bigger if I want to, which is essentially going to show that full report of all of those open documents for that vendor without me having to drill down into that vendor or navigate to that area within Acumatica to view that report as well. All right, so again, can add those to a bunch of different areas of Acumatica. And if you guys have use cases, definitely feel free to reach out to us and we can walk you through that. Or if you have some experience with that, feel free to add those on your own as well. So I'll wrap up here now just with the dashboarding side. So as you guys are aware, Acumatica has a series of different dashboards that might come out of the box, and then we can further tailor those to you guys as well. So I'm working with, in this case, my AP clerk dashboard. I have a lot of different information here, but what I do want to add that is not on here today is going to be essentially my open balances that Julia had just added, that balance due by vendor. She added that to the inquiry, but now I want to see it in some sort of data view. So as we talked about, those GIs can serve the basis for different dashboard widgets. So what I want to do is I want this viewed as maybe just a column chart, and I'll give this a caption, which will be balance due by vendor. And I'll pull in my bills and adjustments screen that we've been working with. And then I'll have essentially the legend be, in this case, my vendor name. We'll keep some of these, we'll keep it descending. We can have a maximum value as well. If I needed an additional series, I could add that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in the value for this as this balance due. So this previously wasn't here for me to pull into this dashboard view, but since Julia added this on that inquiry, now it's available for me to show within Acumatica as well. Here we have, I'm just going to sum it so I can see the sum of all of those balance due by vendor. And then I can also add, different filters or conditions as well. So what I might add here is, some parameters. Maybe I have some outliers that I can go ahead and I'm going to say, let's just do anything less than or equal to 100,000, for example. Just to trim some of my demo data. I'll go ahead and press OK, and now you'll see I have this chart added, and it's going to have my vendors on the bottom here, and now it's pulling from that balance due, so I can see, okay, for this particular vendor, I owe them more money than, for my business software vendor, they have a less balance due, for example. So now, again, based on what we added in our GIs, those can now be used as the basis for adding in dashboard widgets as well. We could do a lot more with this. There's obviously a lot to play around with. But hopefully that gave you guys kind of a good high-level overview of some of what we'd refer to as kind of those no-code features of Acumatica, how you can really make it your own and look and feel the way you want it to from a data perspective, without having to have a lot of development or customization needed as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll wrap up with the next couple of slides. I believe we had a couple more questions before we get into the next couple of slides. Julia, did you want to go ahead and read some of them that we had? And then Austin, I think some dropped in the chat as well.
Yeah. First question was user-defined fields with the new UI. Can user-defined fields be used in calculation in GIs?
Yeah, yep. So we saw that I had added in that user-defined field. As long as we have that added into, for example, some sort of inquiry, whether that's the bills and adjustments like we had shown, then it becomes an available field that you could use for calculations as well. So Julia could have pulled that into a calculation field on the GI if she wanted to. So short answer is yes.
Awesome, thank you. The next question would be, how do I verify the changes I'm making do not affect any other customization in our environment?
Yeah, so that would be one thing. Anything we just showed today, those aren't true customizations from an Acumatica perspective. So all of that's being done through the UI. They don't involve any essentially developer customization or customization packages that we would use within Acumatica. So you don't have to worry about them in terms of, as we upgrade, we need to test out this customization. So they're not going to be true customizations in that sense. So they won't interfere with other ones you have necessarily. The biggest thing that we would think about with everything we showed today is more of the security aspect. So again, all of those changes that we're making are showing across essentially all users that have visibility into those inquiry views. So we would just want to make sure the right people within your organization are the ones managing and adding those components as well. So less from a customization impact and more just from, making sure that we're not adding a million different components if we shouldn't have access to do so.
Awesome.
And another question that came in is, can you create dashboards where the information displayed is related to the person that it specifically applies to? For example, showing project balances for only projects that this particular person is the project lead for.
Yeah. Yep. So that would essentially be, I believe, you typed in the chat too, the @me feature. So you would use that essentially as like a parameter for certain dashboards and or inquiry views. So a common example of that could be a salesperson dashboard. They're only going to see their own sales. It's not going to show me, Julia, Austin, everyone in the organization, but it is using something like that @me feature. So that could very well be extended to other types of dashboards as well.
Perfect. And one final question that came in is, does the UI configuration in the modern UI replace having to do a customization? I believe the answer to that would be it really depends on the need, but feel free to keep me honest there, Kaylee.
Yeah, yep, I would agree with you. I would say we probably want a deeper conversation of exactly what the use case is there. There certainly are still times where we might need customizations in Acumatica, just depending on the use cases and how we want to leverage those types of fields. But for certain use cases, it certainly can be an easier process that doesn't require customization. So we probably want to dive deeper into exactly what that use case is, but short answer would be it would depend on the exact example. Awesome. All right. Perfect. One last slide. I think we had shown this a few months ago as well, but as we're kind of halfway through the year, just something that we like to present is if you guys have folks that are, within your industry or within your network that you're hearing, hey, they have pain points. Hey, we moved to Acumatica, we worked with SVA. We really think that others could start to benefit from it as well. We always just like to keep this in mind. Definitely feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to have a conversation. You can kind of reach out to myself, to Julia, to Andrea as well. If there's anyone that that you think could benefit from, SBA or Acumatica as well. And then just because obviously we enjoy working with you guys, we enjoy working with folks that as well. If you guys kind of put us in touch together, we do have what we have called like a customer referral program. So we would just give you a short thank you for both making an introduction and connecting us with those within your networks as well. And then obviously, if they kind of come on board and become customers of Acumatica and SVA, we do have kind of a gift of additional SVA services for you as well. So just something that we like to highlight as we're kind of halfway through this year, keeping in mind that obviously we love and enjoy working with you guys, and would hope to expand, what we do and our services as much as we can through those that you think would benefit from it as well. Last kind of slide here. I think we got through all the questions. Our next webinar is going to be August 11th at 11 a.m. Be on the lookout for that topic and that invite in the next week or so. And then, as always, these webinars will be posted on our YouTube series. You can find those both on our SVA Consulting website as well as directly within our YouTube channel. We always encourage folks to check out the Acumatica community. And then we have some additional blogs that keep coming out as well, both around AI and Acumatica in general. So be on the lookout for those. Again, can find those within our site, as well as LinkedIn and those types of things as well. So appreciate your guys' time today. Definitely reach out if what you saw you were interested in and you want assistance, maybe adding into your environment specifically. But yeah, I appreciate it and have a good rest of your day.